It was supposed to be just another diplomatic arrival. Red carpet, stiff handshakes, cameras clicking like 1,000 teething rodents. And then Brigitte Macron slapped the president of France. Not in private, not during one of those silent post-argument breakfasts. Number right there, on the tarmac in Hanoi, under the Southeast Asian sun, as the global press zoomed in like vultures spotting a limping deer. It was quick, clinical. 2 fingers straight to the side of Emmanuel's carefully powdered face. The sound, muffled but unmistakable. A perfect mix of Chanel No. 5 and political decay. She didn't yell. She didn't apologize. She just kept walking, heels clacking, lips pursed like she just silenced a child misbehaving at the Louvre. Emmanuel stumbled for half a second, then straightened his tie like nothing had happened. Except everything had. Inside Élysée Palace, Paris 1 hour later. The press office was on fire, but in that very French, very civilized way. Aides paced. Spokespeople whispered in 5 languages. Someone ordered lavender tea, twice. One junior advisor, fresh out of Sciences Po, suggested calling it a moment of togetherness. The room fell silent, then exploded in derisive laughter. Togetherness, scoffed an older aide. If that's togetherness, my ex-wife was a UN peacekeeper. Someone threw a stress ball at the TV. CNN was looping the footage like it was the Zapruder film for dysfunctional democracies. The First Lady of France appears to strike President Macron upon arrival in Vietnam. Élysée sources claim it was a private moment. Social media, however, calls it a public humiliation. Twitter had already crowned it. Number La Slap, number Hand of Brigitte, number Power Couple Goals, and then came the Americans. Specifically, the one American who never needed subtitles. CPAC, Florida. Mid-afternoon, Donald J. Trump took the stage. No teleprompter, no notes. Just that unmistakable grin that usually meant someone was about to get bodied. I saw the video, he began. You saw the video. The whole world saw the video. Laughter. Now listen, in America, if your wife slaps you in front of the world, you apologize to her later. In France, you call it diplomacy. Roaring applause. But seriously, Trump said, adjusting his tie, if your president gets slapped on camera and smiles like he deserved it, maybe it's time to rethink who's in charge. The crowd didn't just laugh, they howled. It wasn't just comedy, it was commentary, and that was the danger. Because in France, they still took pride in appearances, in metaphors, in wine, in slow collapse. And Trump didn't deal in metaphors. He dealt in sledgehammers. Back in Paris, Macron sat in his private office. Alone, watching, he rewound the footage. Not the slap, but the few seconds before. He had leaned in, maybe for a word, a kiss, a comment. Her hand had come up instinctively, almost practiced. He turned off the screen. Outside, a crowd of tourists gathered near the gates. Some were holding signs, not political ones, meme signs, the kind that didn't chant. They laughed. Inside the palace, his phone buzzed. Merkel, call me. This is spreading fast. Draghi, you need to respond now. And from an unknown number, a single message. When the president of France gets slapped by his wife on live TV, it's no longer a marriage story. It's a NATO-level concern. Macron sighed. Then Brigitte entered. No knock, no glance. Just her perfume, thick as doctrine. You've made a mess, she said. He looked up, tired. Me? She smiled like a matador. Of course you. You leaned in. The president of France, leader of a republic, hero of Davos, sat back and said nothing. Outside, the wind picked up. And for the first time in years, the flag atop Élysée shifted, not in direction, but in posture. It drooped, like it too was tired of pretending. Inside the Situation Room, Élysée Palace, 7:42 p.m. Someone had printed the still frame, Brigitte's hand midair, Macron's eyes half shut, his mouth caught in that impossible space between protest and submission. They'd blown it up to A3 size and tacked it on the corkboard. Right above the word crisis in red marker. It's not the slap, groaned the communications director. It's the silence after. Aide-de-camp Philippe leaned in. Sir, the Americans are already re-editing footage to the Street Fighter theme. Round 1. Fight. The room fell quiet again. Macron stood by the window, arms folded like a man trying to hug the last drops of authority clinging to his sleeves. I told you we should have embargoed live camera access, he muttered. Brigitte sat on the opposite end of the room, legs crossed, perfectly poised. She flipped through a French Vogue from 1997 like this was a cafe, not a crisis bunker. You leaned in too close, she said without looking up. You always do that when you're nervous. Aide-de-camp Philippe cleared his throat. Ma'am, with all due respect, the media perception right now is, well, masculinity and freefall. Brigitte finished for him, still flipping pages. Yes, I've seen the memes. She glanced up just once. They're not wrong. A muffled knock. A security officer stepped in, iPad in hand. Sir, you're trending in America. Not politically, culturally. Saturday Night Live just posted a teaser. Title, 50 Shades of Macron. Someone in the room groaned so loudly the chandelier above them trembled. Cancel my next 2 appearances, Macron said, eyes fixed on the floor. We already did, whispered Philippe. He looked up. Oh. Washington, D.C., 2:11 p.m. EST, Trump Campaign HQ. Inside the war room, the footage played on loop like the Zapruder film of European dignity. Trump didn't say much. He just sipped his Diet Coke and let the silence stretch. Finally, he looked at his media advisor. I need 2 things, he said, setting the can down. 1, the exact brand of perfume she was wearing. 2, the last time this guy made a decision without checking with his wife. The media guy blinked. We can probably get one of those. Trump nodded. This isn't just a moment. This is a metaphor wrapped in a marriage wrapped in a European tragedy. He paused. Get Bannon on the line. Tell him France just handed us a gift, and she was wearing heels. Paris. Later that night, Macron's PR team was holding the line. Barely. They'd issued a statement. President and Madame Macron shared a private moment of familial warmth. Any alternative interpretation is both cynical and disrespectful to the institution of marriage. Of course, private moment now had its own parody TikTok dance. Meanwhile, The Guardian ran the headline, From First Lady to First Strike, Brigitte and the Politics of Power. Le Monde countered with a cover featuring Macron's face next to the Eiffel Tower bending sideways. The title, Qui tient la France? Who's holding France? But it was the satire that stung most. One late-night comedian called it the most honest moment in international relations since Merkel's eye roll. Another joked, Macron didn't get slapped. France did. Back in the palace, Brigitte was brushing her hair before bed. You know, she said casually, the problem isn't that they saw me hit you. The problem is they believed it. Macron sat motionless on the edge of the bed. Do you think I wanted this? He said softly. No, she answered, not unkindly, but you let it happen. Silence. He stood, walked to the mirror, touched his cheek. The redness was gone, but the echo remained. He thought about calling Zelensky, or Biden, maybe even Trudeau. Just someone who still had an intact domestic situation. Instead, he reached for the TV remote. Trump was still talking. And the thing is, folks, strength isn't about yelling. It's about not getting slapped in front of a Boeing 777. The audience roared, laughed, clapped. Macron turned off the TV. I'm still the president of France, he whispered to no one. Brigitte turned off the lights. That's adorable. Day 2, Hanoi Press Center. They tried to bury it. They issued statements, clarifications, blamed the camera angle, cited a moment of playful intimacy, and even suggested audaciously that it was lost in cultural translation. Unfortunately for Élysée, violence doesn't translate, it uploads. And in under 24 hours, the SLAP had outpaced climate change on European Twitter. That morning, Vietnamese schoolchildren reenacted it in the streets for TikTok. By noon, a Chinese diplomat whispered during a closed-door ASEAN session, "How's Paris coping with domestic turbulence?" He didn't mean weather. And then came the quotes. Not from tabloids, from parliaments. Hungary's foreign minister. In France, authority is handed from mother to son. That explains the wrinkles and the obedience. German satire outlet Die Ente. The French president was corrected, not by voters but by his life coach/spouse. But it was Poland that went for the throat. Their deputy PM stood before a room full of NATO officials and asked, if the president of France can't negotiate boundaries in his own bedroom, how can he negotiate on our borders? Silence. Even the American envoy cracked a smile. Meanwhile, at CPAC, Orlando, Florida, Trump had moved on from chuckles to doctrine. This time he was in full campaign form. Red tie, open jacket, spotlight just sharp enough to remind everyone. The man never left. And let me just say this, Trump thundered. I like France. I do. Great cheese, great art, terrible leadership. Laughter. They got a guy who looks like a model, talks like a poet, and governs like a group project gone wrong. Applause. And now he's taking marital advice from the woman who assigned him homework. The crowd howled. Then Trump paused. Voice dropped. Energy sharpened. This isn't funny anymore, folks. When a Western leader gets slapped on international soil and smiles about it, we've got a bigger problem than memes. We've got rot. We've got weakness at the top. Silence again. Heavy, calculated. You want to keep the West free? Then lead like it. Or step aside for someone who will. The room exploded. Not because of what he said, but because deep down they knew it wasn't about the slap anymore. It never was. Back in Paris, midnight at Élysée. The palace was quiet, but not still. Inside the residence, Emmanuel Macron sat in his armchair, eyes unfocused, shirt slightly wrinkled, a man halfway through a memory he didn't want to have. Across from him, Brigitte read aloud from a folder. And as of this morning, approval among male voters has dropped 17 points. Female voters, 8. Youth demographics under 25? Meme index, catastrophic. She snapped it shut. He didn't respond. You're letting him win, she said, not raising her voice. Macron blinked. Trump? No, she said flatly. You? He looked up. You think I want to be seen as a schoolmarm with a backhand? You think I enjoy reminding you to be presidential? He shifted in his seat. I didn't mean to. Lean in, speak up, look weak. Silence. I was trying to say something, he said, voice barely audible. Then say it like a man, she said, standing. Or don't say it at all. She walked out of the room, the door clicking shut behind her with the kind of finality only married people understand. 5:30 a.m., somewhere over the Atlantic aboard, a Gulfstream headed to Washington, a senior advisor to Trump scrolled through trending hashtags. Macron, hand of state, La République en coup. He looked up at his boss. You really think this changes anything? Trump leaned back. I think it changes everything, he said. The world just watched a Western leader flinch. That's not a meme. That's a moment. And moments become movements. A pause. And movements. Get presidents elected. Final scene, Paris dawn. The sky over Élysée was soft gray, like France was trying to forget what happened. But memory clings to stone. Inside the palace, Macron stood alone in front of a mirror. He adjusted his tie again, slower this time. Practiced, controlled. He wasn't angry, not visibly, but behind him in the reflection sat the empty chair Brigitte had occupied the night before. Still warm, still powerful. The President of the Republic straightened his lapel, then turned toward the window. Outside, the tricolor waved gently in the wind, but somewhere in that motion, something was different. It didn't look proud. It looked careful, like even the flag had learned not to lean in too far. The headline came quietly. No flashing banners, no breaking news alert. Just a gray font subheader tucked beneath a weekend lifestyle column in Le Figaro. New book raises questions about early relationship between French president and wife. Nobody blinked at first. In France, scandal ages like red wine until someone translated it into English, and then someone in Washington read it aloud with an American accent. Fox News, 7:42 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tucker Carlson leaned into the camera like he was about to narrate a crime scene. 15 years old, she was 40, married, with 3 children. He was a schoolboy, she was his drama teacher, and now she's the First Lady of France. He blinked. But sure, let's keep pretending Europe has the moral high ground. Cut to a still of Emmanuel in a classroom, age blurred to protect the narrative. The Chiron read, "Learning from the top?" By the next morning, the French internet was on fire, and the Élysée was burning from the inside out. Paris, presidential press briefing room. A dozen microphones, 1,000 unasked questions. Macron's press secretary, pale as pastry dough, took the podium. "We reject this sensationalism. The president and Madame Macron have always maintained the highest standards of integrity." A voice from the back. "Is grooming considered a French value now?" He froze, blinked. Next question. Inside the palace, that same hour. Emmanuel sat hunched over his desk, staring at a printed copy of the article. Brigitte entered, already talking. "They're weaponizing something we lived through 20 years ago. How American of them. It's Puritanism dressed as journalism." He didn't look up. "They're not wrong." She stopped. "Excuse me?" His voice was quiet, but sharp. "I was 15. You were my teacher. You were married." Brigitte's eyes narrowed. "That never bothered you before." "I wasn't president before." Silence. She stepped forward. "And you wouldn't be president if I hadn't taught you how to perform." The word perform landed like a slap, but this time off camera. Brussels, European Commission, private lounge. The TV was on mute, but the image spoke for itself. A split screen. Young Emmanuel beside older Brigitte in a theater classroom. Next to the modern couple walking the G7 red carpet. A Belgian minister sipped espresso, then muttered, "If this were Hungary, we'd be filing sanctions." Langley, Virginia, CIA HQ inside a soundproof conference room, 3 intelligence officers stared at a dossier. Photo, timeline, psychological profile, behavioral patterns, handwriting analysis. The youngest of them said what everyone was thinking. "He doesn't make policy, he mirrors her instinct." The oldest nodded. "There's a word for that. Codependency. We don't usually tolerate it in nuclear states." A red stamp hit the file. Vulnerability profile, elevated. Trump National Golf Club, Bedminster, New Jersey. On the green, Trump teed up. 40 and 15, he mused, lining up his shot. "Back when I was that age, I was building hotels." He was memorizing Shakespeare for her. The ball sailed straight, landed smooth. Not that I blame him. The guy was clearly good at taking direction. France likes that. He turned to his aide. "You know what I see here? Not scandal. Leverage." Pause. "They're not running a country. They're rehearsing a script." He grinned. And Brigitte wrote it. Paris. Late evening. Rain falling. Inside the Élysée, Macron stood in front of the mirror again. But this time, he wasn't adjusting a tie. He was practicing a smile. The soft, forgiving one. The kind he used during campaigns, during apologies, during interviews, where he had to act like the country still respected him. Brigitte watched from the doorway, arms crossed. "Try the chin tilt," she suggested. He obeyed. She tilted her head. "Better." A knock at the door. An aide stepped in. "Sir, the German Chancellor is requesting clarification. She wants to know whether you plan to address the grooming allegations publicly." Macron blinked. Brigitte answered, "He won't." The aide hesitated. "Should I put that in writing?" Brigitte stepped forward. "You can tattoo it on her inbox." Final shot. French National Assembly. Empty chamber. The lights dimmed slowly one by one. From the balcony, a lone janitor looked down over the empty seats. He muttered to himself in French, "We used to be a republic." He switched off the final light and walked out in the dark. Shanghai, French Economic Delegation, meeting 11:04 a.m., local time. The delegation had been briefed. President Macron will arrive shortly. Madame Macron is not scheduled to attend. They were wrong on both counts. Brigitte walked in first. Black suit, pearl collar, clipboard in hand like she was hosting a parent-teacher conference for billionaires. Behind her trailed 3 aides, 2 Chinese translators, and a Macron nowhere to be seen. The French trade representative stood, confused. Madame Macron, this was expected to be a technical briefing, she finished for him, which is why I'm here. She smiled, warm and firm. I've been editing his speeches since he was 16. You think I can't handle an MOU? The Chinese minister chuckled. The French delegation did not. Inside Élysée, 1 hour earlier, Macron had tried to leave. Briefcase packed, tie pressed. Then he saw the memo. Revised itinerary, finalized by Macron. Emmanuel not attending Shanghai Roundtable. Schedule shifted to bilateral with Thai PM, virtual only. He stared at the page, then at the aide delivering it. Who authorized this? The aide hesitated. I was told not to ask. Macron leaned back in his chair. The president of the French Republic was officially not on the guest list. Trump Tower, Manhattan, New York, private briefing room. A file slid across the table. It was thin, deliberately so. Inside, photos, flight logs, copies of Brigitte's recent diplomatic meetings, none of which had gone through official protocol. Trump skimmed, then grinned. She's not just running the palace. She's running the tour. A smirk. They gave France a first lady with tenure and tenure-track access to foreign assets. He leaned forward, voice dropping. She's not the president's wife. She's the acting chancellor of the Fifth Republic. Paris editorial meeting, Le Monde. A headline was proposed, then rejected, then whispered across the room. Is France being run by a shadow cabinet of one? Someone called it sexist. Someone else called it overdue. A junior reporter, barely 22, pulled up archival video. Brigitte coaching teenage Emmanuel in theater class. Projection, clarity, posture. The camera zoomed in. Her hand was on his shoulder. His eyes were fixed on her, hungry, uncertain, obedient. The intern whispered, he never stopped looking at her that way. The room went silent. CIA intercept. Internal memo subject. Macron's independence deteriorating. Assessment, unreliable actor. High emotional deference to non-elected spouse. Note, Brigitte Macron holds no security clearance, but continues engaging in high-level talks without escort, oversight, or authorization. Line highlighted, for all practical purposes, France is negotiating through a ghost proxy. Later that day, CPAC Green Room. Trump leaned back in a leather chair, scrolling through a translated transcript. Brigitte had just finished a speech at a gender equity summit in Bangkok. She'd used the phrase, shared sovereignty inside the marriage. Trump laughed out loud. What does that even mean, he said to no one. A producer poked his head in. 2 minutes, Mr. President Trump stood. On his way out, he handed the paper to his aide. Write this down for my keynote. They say France believes in shared power. I say France outsourced it to someone with a lesson plan and a grudge. Paris, Macron's private study. He hadn't spoken to Brigitte all day. Her perfume still lingered in the hallway, like a warning shot. He flipped through his briefing folder, half of it redacted, the other half marked, "For your awareness only." It was his signature on the front, but the content felt ghost-written. A knock. His defense advisor peeked in. Sir, the Americans have requested clarity on your Asia policy. Macron looked up. Which version? The aide blinked. I'm not sure. He stood, walked to the window. Rain. Again. I'm the president, he said, more to the glass than the man. Yes, sir, the aide said, already gone. Closing scene, night, empty presidential hallway. Brigitte walks alone, heels echoing like punctuation. She stops in front of Emmanuel's door, listens, then walks away. No knock, no word. Just the quiet understanding of someone who knows she doesn't need permission. The camera lingers on the hallway, one door closed, the other always open. Brussels. Closed door EU security briefing, 2:11 p.m. The seat with the French flag remained empty. Macron was officially listed as in transit. Unofficially, everyone knew he hadn't been invited. In his place sat a deputy minister with the charisma of a filing cabinet and the credibility of a placeholder. Germany's chancellor leaned sideways and whispered to the Italian PM. The teacher came instead? Italy smirked. Number. The husband stayed home. Half the room chuckled. The other half just checked their phones. Back in Paris, Élysée private chamber Macron paced. The door to Brigitte's wing was closed but not locked. It never was. He could have knocked. He could have asked why she was receiving trade envoys without him. Why the Turkish delegation sent thank you notes addressed Madame la Présidente. Instead, he stared at his own schedule, full of symbolic ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, televised condolences. They were calling it soft optics, but he knew better. It was exile, in real time, in full makeup. Mar-a-Lago, Oval Ballroom, CPAC Encore speech. Trump took the stage with his usual cocktail of defiance and drama. He barely waited for applause to die down. Let me be clear, I'm not against France. I love France. Beautiful country, delicious souffle, fantastic riots, laughter. But I've never seen a republic run by a teacher's manual. He paced slowly across the stage, like a lawyer circling the jury. You think you're negotiating with the president of France? You're not. You're negotiating with his teacher. He stopped, smiled. And if I wanted to talk to a drama coach, I'd go to Hollywood. At least they admit it's fake. Thunderous applause, #. Drama coach began trending within minutes. But the real damage wasn't online. It was diplomatic. Because Trump wasn't joking anymore. He was framing doctrine. And foreign ministries were starting to listen. CIA briefing, Western Europe division, new slide, presidential duality risk, France. Below, a Venn diagram. Left circle, Macron, elected symbolic, diplomatic optics. Right circle, Brigitte, unelected operational private authority center, policy gray zone. One analyst sighed. If we're going to brief the president, we need to decide who to call. Another replied, who's really making decisions? They all looked at the middle of the diagram. No one spoke. French Senate, informal session, off record. A handful of senators sat in a semicircle. No press, no staffers, just wine, cynicism, and constitutional dread. One of the older senators broke the silence. He's been excluded from 3 key councils in a week. Another added, and she's spoken to more world leaders than he has this month. A third, younger one, finally said what everyone was dancing around. We didn't elect both of them. We elected him. Someone topped off his glass. Did we, though? Macron's office, midnight. The room was dark except for the TV glow. He watched a news segment in silence. Trump's clip. Again. You're not negotiating with a president. You're negotiating with his teacher. He didn't flinch. Not this time. His reflection in the window looked older, smaller, then a soft knock. He didn't respond. Brigitte walked in anyway. No hesitation. I spoke to the Canadians, she said. He didn't ask who authorized that. I told them we support their position. On trade, on Taiwan, on their climate agenda. He turned slowly. That wasn't on our platform. She smiled faintly. Then revised the platform. A long pause. Finally, Macron spoke. Why are you doing this? Brigitte raised an eyebrow. Doing what? Running the country, he said. She approached. I'm not running it, Emmanuel. I'm protecting it. From what? He asked. From you, she said, and left the room. Final scene. French suburban cafe, 8:03 a.m. 2 men in their 50s sipped espresso and watched the small wall-mounted TV. Trump's clip played again, this time subtitled in French. One shook his head. C'est honteux. He makes us look weak. The other raised an eyebrow. He doesn't have to try. We did that part ourselves. A young waitress walked by, holding her phone. The screen glowed with a meme of Brigitte photoshopped into Napoleon's uniform. She snickered as she passed. Final shot. Macron's portrait on palace wall dust gathers subtly on the frame. The camera lingers, a flicker of light, and somewhere, just off-screen, a woman's voice rehearses the next speech. Inside Élysée, Situation Room, 6:47 a.m. The meeting began without him. The president of France wasn't late. He wasn't invited. Brigitte sat at the head of the table. No one corrected it. Around her, senior advisors, defense staff, foreign policy aides, everyone who mattered. On the screen, satellite images, troop movement near the Polish border, gas price spikes in Berlin, unrest in the Balkans. France should have led that conversation. Instead, she let it. Her tone was even, precise. No notes, no hesitation. We will not escalate, but we will not defer. France stands firm, but not alone. Someone murmured, beautifully said. Someone else replied, almost presidential. No one laughed. Meanwhile, down the hall, Macron stood alone, staring at the locked conference room door. He could hear voices inside. Laughter, applause. It wasn't just political exile anymore. It was architectural. A presidential security guard walked by, nodded politely, and kept going. No salute, no eye contact, just silence. The kind you reserve for wallpaper. Mar-a-Lago, private strategy session. Trump was halfway through his Diet Coke when the video landed. Brigitte Macron, flanked by French generals, speaking to the press in front of the Élysée. No Macron in sight. She's not First Lady, Trump muttered. She's acting Chancellor of France. His advisors leaned in. He tapped the screen. She's wearing the exact shade of lipstick Merkel used at G7 in 2018. That's not a coincidence. One aide blinked. You remember Merkel's lipstick? Trump grinned. I remember everything, especially weakness dressed as order. He tossed the phone aside. Time to say it plain. The president of France isn't in charge. The real power's in the dressing room, applying foundation and rewriting NATO policy. Paris, opposition headquarters. Midnight. The room was dim, not out of atmosphere, just budget cuts. A rising MP stood in front of a dry erase board with one word on it: vacuum. We've watched a republic hollow itself out from the inside, she said, not by foreign invasion, not by economic collapse, by accommodation. She clicked the remote. A slideshow flicked through. Brigitte in Beijing, Brigitte with Merkel, Brigitte nodding beside the Iranian foreign minister. Finally, a still of Macron at a bakery, cutting a baguette for a tourism campaign. Someone in the back mumbled, when you demote your president to carbs and ribbon cutting, the whole country gets soft. CIA briefing. Langley. The folder was labeled Soft Coup, Behavioral versus Constitutional Authority, Case Study, France. A senior analyst flipped through charts, public visibility ratios, decision-making heat maps, marital dynamics versus executive function. Then she looked up and said it plainly. We are no longer dealing with a head of state. We're dealing with a theater production starring a man who lost the lead role halfway through Act 1, Élysée Courtyard. That morning, Macron wandered the courtyard alone. Camera crews buzzed near the gates. They weren't here for him. They wanted Brigitte's next press briefing. He sat on a bench. A pigeon landed nearby. He looked at it. It didn't fly away. Even the pigeons weren't intimidated anymore. His phone buzzed. A push alert. Trump calls France's president a junior understudy in a one-woman show. He stared at the screen, blankly. Behind him, a window opened. Brigitte stepped out onto a small balcony, waved to the cameras. The crowd applauded. She didn't see him, or maybe she did, and just didn't care. Closing scene, interior, presidential dining room. The table was set for two, but only one seat was filled. Brigitte sipped her tea. She read the morning brief. Macron entered quietly. He stood behind the empty chair. She didn't look up. You've made your point, he said, still reading. I'm still president. Now she looked up. Her expression was calm, controlled. Then start acting like one. He paused. I'm trying. She smiled. Try harder. Final shot. Door between their offices, once symbolic, now literal. Macron stands on one side, Brigitte on the other. Neither opens it, but both can hear the echo. A nation split not by war, not by revolt, but by volume, and one of them is speaking louder. UN General Assembly, New York City, 11:04 a.m., Eastern Standard Ego. The room was full. It always is when Trump speaks. Even the countries that hate him never miss a show. He walked up to the podium like it owed him rent. No teleprompter, no script. Just conviction and a target. This world needs leadership, not drama, not role-playing, not bedtime stories from someone who married the playwright. Silence, then nervous laughter. France! What's happening? The president is cutting ribbons while the first lady is cutting deals. More laughter. Then stillness. He leaned forward. You don't get to run a republic from behind the curtain, and you don't get NATO protection for a relationship contract. Cameras flashed. The French delegation didn't blink, because they'd seen this coming and couldn't stop it. Back in Paris, Interior Ministry briefing room, Macron stood in front of a small group of staffers. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't even a rally. It was a plea, carefully disguised as a policy initiative. France must reclaim its own voice, he said. We cannot be led by perception. We cannot be governed by meme. The room was half full. Aides took notes but didn't raise eyes. Someone in the back whispered, "Does Brigitte approve this message?" Macron heard it. He didn't respond, but the pause said everything. Berlin, NATO Strategic Council. A quiet debate had turned loud, not about Russia or China or energy, about France. What if their president no longer controls his military briefings? Asked a Dutch delegate. Germany's representative adjusted her glasses. Then we've accepted soft monarchy under the illusion of democracy. Someone from Denmark laughed. The illusion part's working just fine. Then came the question no one wanted to answer. Do we still treat him like a head of state? A long pause, then, officially, yes. Practically, we're already adjusting. Meanwhile, Trump campaign bus en route to Ohio. The clip was already viral. His line, "You married the playwright," was now a meme, a ringtone, a t-shirt. An aide handed Trump a tablet. He responded, she said. Trump raised an eyebrow. Macron? The aide nodded. A video, Macron standing in front of the French flag, looking directly at the camera, voice steady. I was elected by the people of France. I serve the Constitution, not commentary, not Twitter, not theatrics, and certainly not the opinion of another country's former president. Trump chuckled. He's trying to grow teeth. He handed the tablet back. But he's still smiling with someone else's lips. Interior. French intelligence briefing room. A report landed on the desk. Stamped confidentiel. Inside, transcripts of Brigitte's private meetings with 3 EU energy ministers. Unofficial, unapproved, unrecorded. The last page. A warning. Pattern indicates consolidation of influence. Undocumented decisions presented as joint policy. Macron often briefed after statements are issued. The director sighed. This isn't governance, she muttered. It's theater. And the understudy never left the stage. Late night, presidential bedroom. Macron stared at the ceiling. The light from the street cast shadows that looked like vote tallies. Brigitte entered, hair pinned back, sleeves rolled. Not a wife coming to bed. A manager checking inventory. You challenged Trump, she said. He nodded. He's not your fight, she added. Macron sat up. He insulted France. Brigitte crossed her arms. He insulted me. You just got caught in the splash zone. He stood, barefoot, bare-chested, but not brave. I am the president. Brigitte smiled like a funeral. Then act like it. He took a step forward. Stop taking meetings without me. She didn't flinch. Start showing up before I do. Closing scene, UN cafeteria, day after 2 junior diplomats from Spain and Sweden sip coffee. On the TV in the background, a panel debates whether Macron can survive another term, politically, emotionally, symbolically. One diplomat shrugs. He's not weak. He's just unaccompanied. The other stirs his drink. The problem isn't that she's stronger. It's that he let us see it. They clink mugs in quiet agreement. Behind them, the TV pans to Brigitte walking through the Élysée courtyard. Alone, confident, applauded. Interior. Presidential motorcade. Morning en route to Versailles. The car ride was silent, except for the soft hum of history catching up. Macron sat alone in the back, scrolling through headlines like a man reading his own obituary in real time. Brigitte, de facto president, Who speaks for France? Macron, phantom in his own palace. He set the phone down. The motorcade passed a crowd near Pont Alexandre III. A few people waved, but they weren't waving at him. They were holding signs. The signs read, Madame Présidente, Interior, Versailles Treaty Hall. It was supposed to be a routine summit, symbolic, decorative, a photo op. But something had shifted. Macron entered through the side door, alone. No Brigitte, no entourage. Reporters noticed immediately. The German Chancellor leaned to the Spanish Prime Minister and whispered, Where's she? Spain shrugged. Maybe she let him out on his own today. Then Macron reached the podium. No one expected what came next. He opened his notes. Not the ones Brigitte's aides had rewritten, not the ones passed down from his staff, his notes. He cleared his throat and spoke. For too long, this republic has relied on theater, on performance instead of principle, on symbolism instead of sovereignty. Chairs shifted, cameras rose. France is not an accessory, not a caption, not a meme. We are a nation, defined not by relationships, but by resolve. He paused. The room held its breath. I speak now not as someone's husband, but as the President of France. Inside the Élysée, Brigitte stood in front of a muted television. Her expression didn't break, but her fingers clenched, just slightly. An aide stepped forward. Should we draft a response? She didn't answer. The screen flashed another headline. Breaking, Macron declares, no more shadows. She turned toward the window and whispered, I told him to act like it. Didn't think he actually would. United Nations Assembly Hall, 2 days later. Trump returned to the podium, but this time there was no mockery, no one-liners, no theatrics. He read from a single sheet of paper. President Macron made a speech this week. Strong words, unexpected words. He looked up. I like strength, even late strength, because leadership doesn't have a clock. It has consequences. He folded the paper once. But remember this, a country cannot serve two masters, and a leader cannot whisper while his shadow shouts. French Senate, emergency session. The chamber buzzed. Macron had requested full executive discretion. No parallel briefings to the First Lady. Half the senators were confused. The other half looked quietly relieved. One older centrist finally stood and spoke. It's not about whether she's competent. It's about whether we still know who governs. Muted applause followed. Interior, hallway between their offices. Macron walked toward her door. No guards, no cameras, no script. She opened the door before he could knock. They stared at each other. He didn't flinch. You've led in my silence, he said. She studied him. You handed me the mic. Maybe, but I'm taking it back. She exhaled, then stepped aside. Let's see what your voice sounds like. He entered, not as a husband, not as a student, as something France hadn't seen in months. A president. Montage. No voiceover, only image and sound. A tweet from CNN. Macron strikes back. Brigitte at an NGO roundtable. Observing, not leading, not yet. Trump boarding Air Force One. A reporter shouts, Do you still think Macron's not in charge? Trump shrugs. We'll see if he makes it stick. A French flag over the Élysée, this time fluttering higher. Not triumphant, but deliberate. At a kiosk in Marseille, newspaper headlines stacked, Macron, Brigitte, Trump. Below them, a small tabloid reads, Who lost France? And beneath it, no one, yet. Interior, quiet office, late night. Macron stands at his desk, pen hovering over a new speech. He writes the title, One Law or None. He stops, looks up. The camera pulls back slowly. Beyond the windows, the lights of Paris flicker. Not fading, shifting, not resolved, not victorious, just different. And somewhere in the quiet between headlines and history, the tremors begin.